All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back, Coach Ken from Giving It a Try. Balancing life 1 mile at a time. We're trying to do our first guest interview today, our first guest on the show here, and I'd like to introduce him real quick. This is Ryan Barisi. Ryan is a coach with extensive experience in endurance training, specializing in ultramarathon coaching. It's a deep passion for the sport. Ryan combines his expertise in coaching with his own personal journey as an avid ultra runner, enabling him to provide practical, experience based guidance to athletes. He's created a website, therunningape.com, which represents dedication to true health, adventure, and the steady pursuit of physical and mental well being through the simple act of placing one foot in front of another. So, Ryan, welcome to the show. I'd like to, just real recap on how you got into running. Really, just few minutes on that.
Well, thanks, Ken. I'm really excited to be here. It's awesome to be the first guest on your podcast here. So yeah, how did I get into running? I'll try to give the long and the short. I tend to be a little long-winded, but when I was like 35, I didn't get into running really till I was I work at like had desk job, from my 20s. I was very active in teenage years, skateboarding for 10 years and stuff like that, but then kind of just got stagnant and sitting at the desk all day working. And by 35, I was kind of just 220 pounds, which is, at 5'8" was pretty heavy. And I would just was insecure, just unhealthy. Like, and there was one day where I was just going up the stairs in my house and was kind of short of breath. And it was like, man, I just need to make a change. And I started just really diving into like podcasts, and I was reading Mark Sisson's book on diet and things like that. And I saw like some kind of YouTube video with Halle Berry talking about how she trained for whatever movie she was doing at the time. And she had this celebrity trainer, and I picked up his book. It was like a fad book, like Five Factor Fitness, it was called. And it was super approachable though, in the sense of like it was 5 days a week. You did a 5 minute cardio, you did two like a superset and a core workout, and then 5 minutes more cardio, and that was the workouts, and like it was just variable. So I did that for 5 weeks. And I got my shoulder was hurting me a little bit, and I'm like, but I also was feeling better. And I was also playing with my diet, reading everything on like this was starting paleo and like the keto phase and all the things we're going through. So I was reading up on all that stuff and nutrition. I went and got like, because anything, like I tried to dive deep into subjects. So I dove deep. I got like my blood work done and did like the blood type diet for a little bit, and then did paleo, keto. But as I was reading through like Mark Sisson stuff, the primal like nutrition stuff, things like that, they talked about barefoot shoes. So I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. And then like it somehow brought me to Born to Run. And so I get into Born to Run, and I'm like, wow, like there was a quote in the book, I forgot her name, but she said like you live your life in a day, run 100 miles. And I was 35 at the time. I'm like, by the time I'm 40, I want to do a 100 miler, like just like set this goal. And so that was kind of that like set the thing. I started running, I bought a pair of zeros. I was running in like minimalist shoes, just doing that. And I hired a coach. My first coach, he headed up the Parisi program, at which was like a sports performance program. He was the director at the local gym by me. And I'd go to him for a half hour twice a week. And I would just run to the gym and run back. Like that was my thing. And I didn't have any plan for running outside of just like run as hard as you can every time you go out there. But then slowly, like as I started like shedding weight from the diet, gaining muscle, I kind of stepped away from the running a bit. Like I do it as cardio, but got more into the strength training. And I started landing in like as you go down these rabbit holes, I found On It. On It had like kettlebells and steel maces and these like because the thing I didn't like about the gym was like I didn't like the linear like bench pressing and stuff like that. And so I found that hot yoga and all these alternative types of like exercise. And I found like this guy Primal Soldier and this Francesca Martinez did like animal flow stuff as well. And I went to a bunch of their workshops, got some certs there, for like the kettlebell animal flow stuff things, and just like fell in love with it. And did that for a long time. But then, as I was kind of approaching 40, I'm like, oh, like I have not been doing this running thing. Like I would do little 5Ks here and there, but I wasn't like focused on the running part. And as I was turning 40, my wife's like, what do you want to do? Let's do something special. And I said, let's hike the 100 mile wilderness. So that was my way of doing my 100 by 40 was to do 100-mile wilderness. But after doing that, it was like, it was the rawest, we were out there for 7 days living off our backs and everything. I was like, this is incredible. But then it sparked me to get back to, I think this was in the lead up to when Nick Bear did his Leadville too. So I used that as like my training to do the 100-mile wilderness hike. And then I was just hooked back to running, like double down. And this was it really, I would say a little prior to that. So I mean, let me roll back. A little prior to that, like with COVID on the lockdown, is when I running started to really come back a bit more for me. And that was because in the house all day, kids, you couldn't do anything, you couldn't go anywhere. And I was like, you know what? They going out and just being able to run in the woods was like freedom. No one could tell you what to do. You just put shoes on and you just go. And that was like, it was really nice to have that freedom. I'd meet up with my brother. We'd run in the mornings during COVID, during the lockdown, and then we'd walk. My dad would meet us, and we'd walk with him, and it was kind of a nice, just kind of thing, and that like really brought me back. So then when like things opened up, I met the trail running group, Long Island Trail Running Club, how I met you. In like December, the first run I did with them was like a almost 20 mile, like a 15-mile run in the snow. And it was like, these people are my people, right? And so I finally was like, okay, sign up for my first ultra. This was about 3 years ago, right? It was 70K out here. And that was kind of that's how the running just I got into the whole ultra scene. And you start to meet other crazy people, and it's like I met you and like, oh, let's run 20 miles. And then across the island for this fundraiser. And then, oh, let's just go run. My first actual ultra was with you as well, right? We ran, let's just go run a 50K on a Saturday. Like, and you just, we're gonna do it again tomorrow. So like that's you start to run into these people, and it just kept building on that. And I said, okay, now I'm gonna do 100. And I trained really hard for my 100 and went out to the desert, and probably one of the greatest experiences of my life, even though like I went to the desert and ended up with rain and hail anyway. And 17 people finished that race, and I was one of them, but it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And I'm hooked. So yeah, that's
So I definitely think
how.
there's some overlap in our stories because same as you, I started a few years back when it was I needed a change. Like you just wake up one day and you're like something's got to change. Like whatever part you're at in your life, and there's something to be said about when it's like your decision and you want to be all in on something. And
Yeah.
obviously, I think that's why we kind of get along pretty well, as far as we kind of got the same vision on everything and the same goal setting. And it's just funny, yeah. The first time we met each other was on that 20-mile cross island run across Long Island in terrible weather, and I kind of knew that was like my first real dive into that group, and especially meeting you. And I was like, this dude's been this dude likes to grind. Like this guy likes to get after it. So level each other up. Chasing you
Yeah.
around, and then I got to witness your first ultra, which ironically was in training. It wasn't even at an event. I was out doing, I think it was a 20 miler that day. You were doing the whole 32-mile loop, which, yeah, like you said, literally we're doing tomorrow as a training run. And just,
Yeah.
it's a pleasure just to know you and have you kind of in my circle of people that you could just kind of be like, call them up and say, what do you got going on this weekend? You got the 20 miles, I got 30 miles,
Yeah.
or we got this crazy event or adventure you want to go on. And you're at that ability to just kind of go and do it there. So what though kind of drove your passion to move from, obviously now I know why the ultra running piqued you so quick and why you jumped to that journey, but like with the coaching and things like that, like what made you take that next step to
I think,
go
yeah,
down that
yeah.
road?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've known you for a while. Like you've always been, had great insights and always shared a lot of information with me. And I've seen you make people successful. I've seen you be successful in your endeavors. But on top of that, like last year, so like one like you said, I when you first met, he's like, I like to go hard. And like there that is a mind shift that I have actually as I got deeper into the running. I've learned that going hard's not always the best, right? Like, so I did my first 100, I kept I smartly stacked things up to my first 100. And then like I started carrying injuries, and then I'm jumping into a 50K 2 weeks after that 100, like, and you just keep building up to the point where I went and signed up for one of the hardest hundreds there probably is, up in New Hampshire. And 8 weeks out, like I just decided to sign up. I'm like, oh, I could swing it. I did one. right? And I go into that and I already have like a high hamstring tear. My calf didn't was not working with me for the 2 weeks before the race, and I go into this like gnarly 32,000 foot through the White Mountains, and end up coming out of that with a massive, DNFing at like 74 miles, like a really bad stress fracture that like took me out for 3 months. And from there, I was like, you end up in, you go from running like I was running all the time, um, to like in purgatory, and like I'm now researching how like amputees do exercises because I can't use my leg and stuff like that. So, and like that was a great lesson. It was something I needed. It was one of those humbling experiences that I think sometimes are benefits. And so with that failure, I decided, you know what? I'm gonna hire a coach. So on my comeback, I hired a coach, and he really he was coming off a stress fracture. I used a lot of his like off the shelf plans to help model a lot of my training. But doing that, like I also like to strength train a lot and stack those things. Because I always thought, especially as someone who's in my 40s, it really helps maintain and sustain power and things like that. I uh I hired this coach, and I'm like, I want to go back to that race and I want to crush that race. Like that was like I had a fire. Like I'm not used to like I'm one to like I'll take failure, but like I'm gonna come back. So I I was obsessed with going back to that race, Jigger Johnson up in New Hampshire, and finishing it, and not just finishing it, but like crushing it. And so it started with Mount Mitchell 50 miler. That was going to be my goal starting around this time last year. And he started helping build me back. And all year he built me back, and I was like, oh, I'm only going to use him for a couple months, and then another race. And so the thing like I started doing strategic like training races, and like just this mature level of training that it was just a natural progression from like this kind of, okay, I have fitness and I could do a lot of cool stuff, to strategic fitness, right? Like really dialing things in for specific goals, dialing in nutrition. Like my first ultra, I ran, barely had any water. Like, my muscles seized up the night after the race, like so and like last year I just had so many successful races, what training races, controlled, but then like going back to the race that I DNF'd and ended up in eighth place, 39 hours, which for that race is a decent time. They give you 54, um, because it is so rugged and gnarly. And I just said, you know what, this is amazing. And so I decided to like I learned so much from the coaching that I wanted to understand deeper, and I knew it would make me a better athlete. So I really got into it just to be a better athlete and understand my own goals and kind of go back out on my own. But then I started, helping some. I'm always getting questions from people too. Like, like I post, I talk about it. And so people ask like, what do you think of this? Or, do you coach this, that, and the other thing? And so I decided, maybe it's time to, get that. And maybe I could start to help people. Cause like, not that I couldn't give people feedback and input, but I'd like to, make sure that I have like some authority behind it, and I'm not just giving them like what I heard on a podcast, or like what's the latest trend. Like I want to have like I have my own ideas, I have my own thoughts on how like train in theory, but I want to understand the depths of like the models that train theory is based on.
I think again that's another overlap is the unfortunately you had the point of going hard and your body decided when you
Yeah.
needed a break. For myself, it was the year of COVID when everything shut down. I was almost at that point where my body started breaking down the beginning of that year, but thankfully for me, everything was canceled. So it was a halt, an external factor that stopped my progression that year and made me really buckle down. And the same thing, it was, I think a lot of people may get into coaching, and that's for the right reason. Is you want to kind of make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and again get an authority behind it and be able to establish yourself with like a little bit of a presence behind it as opposed to just somebody who somebody's following. And the whole totality of it. Coaching is more than just going out there and getting it done. There's so many other layers of training, and that's one of the main reasons why I want to have you on here. Is it's great because we've heard your story now up until and at points when your body broke down, and the whole point of this now is there may be some people out there that are inspired that maybe have been running for a while. They may want to start dabbling into this 26.2 plus distance. It may be just to complete a 50K, or they've done some marathons before, road running, and then now they want to go into ultra running, 50K, 50 miler plus, or who knows where the limit in that journey will be. But maybe, we're just going to talk about things that we both learned through this process that as a coach now, one of my big things is, sustainability and longevity in endurance sports, whatever it is that your goal is, because undoubtedly, I'm sure when you weren't out there getting after it, getting mileage in, and being able to do what you can do with two legs, you were kind of bummed out and upset. And if something's taken away from you that maybe could have been prevented with the right knowledge and the right structure, that you could actually enjoy this journey that much longer, yeah, and sustainably, and be able to get and reach all these goals that you want. So looking back on it, what would be some of the, looking big picture now, because you did talk like fad diets, fad things, a lot of things that were being, as you started researching, kind of thrown at you, and you were just picking things out and doing things which do have their initial, return in investment when you put into that, but the sustainability is not there in some of these techniques. I talk about the big blocks all the time, like self-assessing. How has your run journey been up to this point? Is your body ready for distances above 26.2 miles? Do you have the capability and time to invest in all the things you need to do besides the mileage? So, what are
Mhm.
some points and things you might be able to give somebody if they did come to you as a coach and said, "Hey, Ryan, I heard you coach ultras, and I want to step up to that. I see all these mileage you're doing, but is there a conversation you're going to have with that person on a one-to-one to make sure that they are ready to step into that world?"
Yeah, I mean, some of it's cliche in the sense of like you need to have a foundation, right? Like, so first off, like you need, you could get there just through consistent work, but like some of that work might not be, the sexy stuff that you hear about on a podcast and things like that, right? It might just be, base running, simple Z2 just to build a base like that. If you don't have that foundation, then that's where at. If you have some foundation, like, some of the people I work with now, like you could push that and you could test those limits, but there still has to be discipline, because one thing's like, especially that ultra runners are notorious for, is like once you learn what you can do, you think you're like, oh, I could just do this. Like they'll do two long runs over a weekend, and long runs being like a 15 mile days or something, and then on Monday do a speed workout and then wonder why they have a stress fracture, right? Or like they see that David Roche just posted a video about like this hardcore workout and they want to throw that down in there, but you're not there yet, and like, and that's where like I think coaches are the most beneficial, is like they're there not to like, oh, just give you like workouts, but also like, hold you back from like, like I know when I first started with my coach, I was like, oh, like, I know I just got back from a stress fracture, but I'm gonna go run this mountain with my friends for 4.5 hours. And he's like, "May you might want to tone that down, because like you might want to like take a step back and think about that for a minute." And that I think that's one of the benefits of coaching. So that's one of those things. And then it's like, you have the people who are just like, like my wife's a perfect example. She wanted a goal, so she set a goal to do a half marathon in the Bear Mountains at Bear Mountain. And she's not gonna do it, like she's not taking it like I would take it, where like I'm looking to like push myself to the edge, like, and like see how far I could take a race and PR, every time I hit a distance. She just wants to go complete it and feel good and have a good time out there. And that's a different model too, right? So it really got to understand what their goal is, who they are, and like what they're looking to do. Does that answer what you were kind of?
Yeah, I mean, but every time if I had an athlete that was interested in something like this, I would send them out a little bit of a questionnaire, and it's kind of I like to find out about their history of training, and just how many, where they've been, some race results and things like that, where they're at currently, and like you just said, what are your goals? Is this, we just want to complete these races? Do we want to be competitive? What is the goal? Those need to be clearly defined ahead of time. But what's tough for a coach is this subjective and the objective feedback. Is I can look at a consult form and be like, oh cool, you had a good 2-3 year progression of running, and oh, you had some decent even marathon times. Okay, you want to step up to some longer distances, but
Yeah.
we don't have the subjective feedback of how'd you feel during all that. Like, that's not on paper. Did you how'd you sleep through those couple years of training? How were you eating like a child? You weren't feeling yourself enough. Were you out crushing your training and just smashing snacks all day and not getting in what you needed to do? Is your body on that borderline of, if now we continue on and progress, is that the breaking point where your body's
Mhm.
going to tell you to stop? So there is definitely a lot of conversations that need to be had, and even self-assessment. If you're not looking for a coach and you just want to download that 50K plan or something like that, is okay, you might have the time to put the mileage in training and say, I can do this, but there's so many other layers. And I forgot the first time I heard this, but ultra running brings out every little thing that you might have going on in your body or an imbalance becomes magnified over these distances.
It's that quote, right? It's like, and
It's
that's one of the things when you get to the ultra, like even the ultra training, like there's a point where like when you start to get into the specificity of your race, especially if it's like a mountain race, you're doing some long runs and back to back sometimes during on the weekends. And there's a huge like you really to the beginning piece, you have to know what your why to some extent because when you're gonna be grinding out there. Like it looks glorious when you're watching some of these like really awesome videos on social media and all that. And it is glorious because like when you're in it, it's not though. Like, like at the end you do feel like, wow, I just traversed these mountains and things, but there's a commitment to it. There is a level of pain that you're gonna deal with that is very different than like like a half like not that like a half marathon though marathon might be one of the hardest training like races you can do in the sense and mountain ones equally, but on a road marathon like you're going fast for a while and that's so they're different animals. Even if you have like road marathon experience getting into an ultra, which tend to be on trails and they tend to be just gnarlier. It's a different muscles. Your lateral. There's all types of different movements. It's like a full body workout in some ways, right? And your mind always has to be on. It's very different on a road. You can kind of get into a mode where on a trail you have to constantly be alert. You got to be focused. You have to have trail vision, right?
And even
So,
somebody who's done, like, let's just take a runner who's now completed two full marathons in a great 4 hour time. They are right at that 4 hour mark. They did good training blocks over a 18-month period. They did two marathons. There's a lot different between being on your feet. Like you said, it's a hard 4 hours when you're out there. But now, even if it's a road 50K or 50 miler, you're going to be out there that much longer on race day. Like what you may have done strength training wise for that distance for the marathon. And again, if you're traversing some technical terrain or even just rolling terrain on a road, you're out there that much longer. You're going to go into this other level of fatigue during training and the race that, everybody handles hard a little differently. I've even noticed that in some of my athletes. Like, you know, like you said, it all looks great on Instagram when, you have a picture of somebody rolling through a mountain with the background and you're like, wow, that's awesome. I want to be out there doing that. But like that they're battling some demons in there.
oh yeah, I mean,
uh,
go ahead. I'm sorry, finish your point.
no, you can pass it over to you.
So that was the thing. Like I did it in reverse, right? Like I did my first road marathon this year, right? And like to your point, like I'm the kind of guy who like you reach out and you say, hey, you want to go do this, and I'm kind of like, yeah, let's do it. Well, my friend Amy, reached out and was like, hey, like, or our friend Amy, like, reached out and was like, hey, I want to run this road marathon and for Boston qualification, and it was like a month out, and it was like, sure, like being like ultra runs, like, oh, it's just a marathon. So we got trained up, super shoes, locked in. Can provide a solid pace and plan and experience, and we went out and did it. But like that's a huge like the difference was just not only the pacing that we're running this whole time, right? It's also the fact that like you can have a pace plan. Like one of the things with like ultras, especially trail ultras, like depending on the course, like where like with road running, you could kind of measure by pace and say, hey, like it's kind of all the same platform. But like ultras, you almost got to look at by the course. Because what kind of course is it? Is it a flat desert ultra like Black Canyon? Is it a mountain ultra like Jigger Johnson up in New Hampshire? Like those are very different. Like so like you're not going to be worrying about doing a 7:30 pace because you're going to be, you know, you're going to be hiking for a half hour up a 3 mile, you know, climb. So it's really interesting, like the differences there too. And then how do people handle that, right? Like what happens to elements? Like another thing, like some people like you get them out in the rain, and it's like they're falling apart. Like, and now they're out there for 5 hours in the rain too. It's like, oh man, it's very different. uh yeah, it's just so interesting, the different approaches, and that's all the kind of stuff that usually people that want to get into ultras, that we know like there's some expectation of like what you're gonna see, like what to expect. um yeah.
I mean, I would even think, even if somebody's not looking for a coach, but they just want to start maybe dabbling in the thoughts of going to ultra, is I think it'd be even important to even just a one-off consult with somebody who has the experience, and you can really talk to them. Because, like you said, I mean, you can Google and look at people that do things, but you only see really the good of things that happen on social media and things like, oh, it's all great. Look at Ryan just crushes these runs all the time. It must be so easy. But you don't really know what goes on behind the scenes and how much work really goes on. I know how much work you put on outside of the Strava runs, that get posted on Strava, like the world that still goes on to support that activity. Even just to talk to somebody for an hour and do a consult where it's like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. I really need your honest assessment on me. And it may be, I might even tell the person, I think you need a 6 month prep time before we start building for that. I think we really need some strength training. If you haven't had any structured strength training for the past year or two, I'd rather you build that base of that now, ahead of time, and then continue on. Maybe do here's X, Y, and Z. Here's a 2 to 3 month self guided plan that I think you should do, and then also that's a way for someone, as a coach, to see if they're all in on this, like it's something they really want, is if they'll go the distance to do the work that needs to be done just to start off into this world of ultra running, because it's not just increase your mileage, because things can go bad very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, strength training is such like I know it's been said a lot at this point, but like it's something that people don't do enough of, and it has just massive benefits. Just running, like overall, just lifestyle too. Like, but I think for running, like it could help you recover faster. It could, especially if you're doing like these kind of hillier or more mountainous runs, you're just going to be able to climb and recover faster from those climbs. There's a lot of benefits to it, and like as if you're an aging athlete, like I like it gives you power, it helps you keep that power, which is what you lose a lot of. So yeah.
So again, like I said, I think it circles back to like the big block philosophy. Self assessment if you're interested in this type of progression in running, or even this could even be applicable to somebody who has just done shorter course running, not really maybe up to like the half marathon, and maybe even looking at the marathon distance. That is still a big jump in running, in
Hmm.
volume and training. There's a huge difference in commitment between training up for a half marathon versus a marathon. Just those big blocks, like I find the athletes that I coach have much better success when they're really making sure they're getting the sleep that's needed. They're balancing stress in their life as best as possible outside of training, because the training puts an overwhelming amount of stress on the body. But if you're carrying this day-to-day stress of just life, which is natural, but it's all how you deal with it, and you have to balance it too. If work, life, family is just smashing you down, and then you're doing these smashing yourself on these runs on the weekend, you're just not going to recover. I don't care how well you sleep or eat. You're just going to be burned out. So trying to balance all of that, good nutrition, eating the right food, eating the right amount of food, because that can be an issue as well as you start increasing these hours upon hours of weekly training and adding in strength training.
I
Um,
blame the stress. Yeah, I blame my stress factor a lot on the fact that I was still kind of low carb in a bit, and that was just not beneficial. Even like now that I properly fuel during my training, it's just the difference. I mean, that's the reason I've gotten a little faster and stuff like that, is I think a lot to do with just fueling myself properly, making sure I sleep better, things like that. The big block philosophy to me, like I think if you're just starting out in this stuff, like it makes sense like to like do these big of training blocks and things like that, and then move into, like as you get more mature in that stuff, you could start to do little micro blocks where like you're kind of very focused on these little, like this year I'm experimenting a lot with that, with my training races being key workouts. And I just have a lot of those stacked to kind of push me into the next little micro block. But I think that's something to get the discipline is to start with like a broad stroke, right? And then you could start to get into finer details. I think that's the key.
yeah, I've often referred to it as baking a cake, painting a picture, like you start with the bigger stuff, the bigger ingredients. Even we've talked about a few different things I'm going to change in my training this year, and it's only now after X amount of years and all these different races where I've pretty gone pretty well at the big blocks. Sometimes you have to circle back and revisit those big blocks and clean them up. But
Hmm.
don't worry about these little fine details of what you saw online that like, oh, look at this training. And if you do this, you'll get your VO2 will go up X percent after a week. Like if you're not doing your training and you're not eating right, you
Yeah.
don't worry about that. Like just focus,
This is where
focus,
people
focus.
rush,
Yeah,
right? Like they see Strava and they see what everyone else is doing. They want to be running that,
exactly.
doing that, doing that. Like, and it's if you do that, you're gonna end up injured, and you're probably gonna take a step back versus just set like go in your like do run your race, do go on your journey, right? Like, do not try to be someone else. You will get there. Like at some point, like when you get to a point in fitness, anybody, right? You start to plateau a bit, and you need to, like your gains are going to be slower. So like while like you might have that one person that's like they're your carrot that you're trying to chase down, like just give it time. You'll catch up at some point. Um, you know, if you do the work, but don't rush it because by rushing it, you'll probably set yourself backwards. That's just the way, that's the lessons I've learned, at least. Trying to run everyone else's race instead of my own. And that goes for when you're in the race too. You could go out hot with everyone, but you're probably going to fall off and miss your goal, you know? And yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from just everything today and the Dirt's journey in general is it's a journey. I tell people all the time, like even if you just want to start running and you have ambitions of running an ultra, it doesn't have to be 12 months. It doesn't have to be 18 months. Like enjoy the whole process. Let it be sustainable. Have longevity in it, especially if it's something you really enjoy. Enjoy all the steps along the way, learning everything, adding layer upon layer, and you'll have a successful journey. Because there's nothing. Again, I'll say it all the time. In a world where everything is just instant, 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 we want instant results, instant fitness, instant abs, instant cooking, instant pod, instant everything. Endurance is still the one thing that is just delayed gratification. Like you have a goal, you have to set it way far out and build an entire map on how to get there and enjoy the process along the way. Have that hard fun from
Yeah.
start to finish and surround yourself with people that can carry you, through that, lift each other up. And, you can create a little community based upon your goals like that. I mean, God,
Mm.
limitless. You can probably reach your potential one day, and it'd be awesome.
An ultra, right? It's
Yeah,
not a 5K, it's an ultra.
that's it. And it brings out all the different feelings out of people during the whole process, and including on race day. You'll learn things about yourself that you didn't even know you were
Yeah.
capable of doing.
Yeah. And one of the beauties of ultras is like, just like when you're out there and you're like, sometimes like depending on the race, like if you're doing like 100 mile, like you're running, and if it's an out and back or something, you're like, I'm gonna be here tomorrow. And you just, like that is something that you just get comfortable with. Like I'm gonna be here tomorrow. Like in this spot, I'm gonna be running back. Um, and that's just like it, and every brick you stack, you learn something from, and that's how you get to a point where then like you just dive into these crazy adventures. Like, hey, you want to go run a 50K on Saturday, and you do it. And that's the beautiful part is having that fitness. Because it just makes you feel like you know you could do anything, and usually can, because if you go through that hardship, you can make it through most things.
If you do the journey right, it's truly transformative and will carry over into other aspects of your life for sure.
100%.
As we wrap up today, because I do have to go ready for our 50K adventure tomorrow. Is there any final words on anybody out there? Again, that's just curious about this ultra world, or looking to step up to that distance.
I would say you're capable of a lot more than you think you are. It's healthy to question yourself, but you'll surprise yourself on how much further you could go than even you think you can.
Nice. Well, Ryan,
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking some time out today. I hope you had some fun here. I hope the listeners were able to take a few things away. And Ryan, I'm sure love to have you on as much as you'd like. I'm sure you have plenty of
Sure.
insightful stuff, and I'd like to hear more about your journey with ultra running.
Yeah, this was fantastic. Appreciate it, man.
All right, I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning, buddy.
Yep. Stay healthy. See you
Take
guys
care.
later.
Take care,
Bye.
everybody.